The most dangerous truth is not hidden in the light, but in the shadows we choose to love. There exists a rare kind of soul who walks into darkness, not out of ignorance, but out of empathy. These are the rare empaths. They do not attract the radiant, the healed, or the harmless. They attract the broken, the tormented, and the untamed. Jung once called this attraction a sacred trap, a paradox inside the psyche that binds the one who feels too much to the one who hides too much. And if you have ever been one of them, you already know the pull. It is magnetic, irrational, and almost holy in its intensity. You meet someone whose pain vibrates like a secret frequency only you can hear. Their sadness feels familiar. Their wounds mirror something nameless inside you. You tell yourself that you can save them. You believe that your love can heal what the world has destroyed. But this pull is not love, and it is not compassion. It is the shadow calling you home. It whispers your name through the voices of others. It wears the mask of destiny and convinces you that your suffering is sacred. Carl Jung understood this phenomenon not as romance, but as psychological gravity. The empath does not fall in love with the person before them. They fall in love with their own reflection, projected into another body. That is why the connection feels fated, as though written by the stars. But what you are truly meeting is the unhealed part of yourself, the hidden fragment you have buried under kindness, patience, and self-sacrifice. Let me tell you a story. There was once a woman named Anna, a patient of Jung, though that was not her real name. She came to analysis trembling, her hands shaking as if her very soul was trying to escape through her fingers. She had fallen deeply in love with a man who was both wounded and violent. He drank until his eyes went black, he raged until the walls shook, and yet she stayed. She told Jung that she saw something inside him no one else could see. She saw the little boy he once was, crying alone in the dark. She believed it was her destiny to bring him back to the light. Every night she returned home with bruises, not all of them on her skin, but all of them on her soul. Her friends begged her to leave. Her family warned her she would be destroyed. Still she whispered to herself, "He is not what he does to me. He is the pain he carries." Jung listened quietly. He did not judge her devotion, for he knew it was real, but he also knew the danger. Anna was not looking at her lover. She was looking at herself, her own shadow, dressed in his suffering. Her unconscious had taken shape in another person, and she could no longer tell where her pain ended and his began. That is the sacred trap. You think you are saving someone else, but you are really confronting the darkest corners of your own soul. The empath's compassion becomes a mirror, reflecting what has been disowned. It is not random, it is synchronistic. Your vibration, your sensitivity, your openness, these act as invitations to the hidden suffering of others. Those carrying rage, shame, abuse, or cruelty feel drawn to you as if you are a safe harbor, but what they truly feel is the gravity of their own shadow being called forth by yours. You awaken in them what they cannot face, and in return, they awaken in you what you have long denied. The shadow is not only what others hide, it is what you hide. For the empath, the shadow is not cruelty or domination. It is suppressed rage, denied power, and forbidden desire. And when someone appears who embodies those things, you are mesmerized, not because of who they are, but because of what they carry for you. They hold the disowned fragments of your psyche, and that is why leaving them feels impossible. To walk away from them would mean abandoning a part of yourself that you have longed to reclaim. When Jung spoke of the sacred trap, he did not describe it as punishment, but as initiation. He said that every empath who walks this path will recognize its signs, though most will not want to see them. These signs are not found in the other person. They are found in yourself, in the quiet erosion of your own boundaries, in the ways you disappear trying to hold someone else together. Sign 1. You are drawn to people who frighten you as much as they fascinate you. There is something in their chaos that feels like home. You tell yourself that you see the good in them, that your love will awaken what is dormant. But beneath that belief lies a pulse of danger that both terrifies and excites you. That thrill is not destiny, it is your shadow knocking. The part of you that was forbidden to feel powerful, angry, or wild now finds those qualities alive in another person, and you mistake the reflection for a soulmate. Sign 2. You forgive again and again, even when the apology never comes. You tell yourself that patience is love, that understanding is holiness, that endurance is virtue. But love without boundaries is not love. It is self-erasure disguised as compassion. You confuse their suffering with innocence, and you mistake your ability to endure pain for proof of devotion. Yet every time you forgive cruelty without change, you teach your soul that betrayal is normal. You allow your light to become the currency of their darkness. Sign 3. You begin to lose yourself. At first it happens quietly. You stop painting, you stop meeting friends, you stop hearing your own thoughts. Your voice trembles when you speak because somewhere deep inside, you no longer believe that your voice matters. You no longer know if you are living your own life or someone else's. This is the shadow basement, the place where light is swallowed, and the empath becomes a ghost in their own story. You call it love, but love does not consume identity. Love mirrors it back to life. Sign 4. You carry their shame as if it were your own. You explain their cruelty, justify their temper, excuse their neglect. You tell yourself that they are only this way because of their trauma, their fear, their past. You believe that to understand is to absolve, but in doing so, you sacrifice your own dignity on the altar of their pain. Jung warned that this is the moment when empathy becomes martyrdom. The empath begins to feel responsible for another person's healing, forgetting that compassion without truth is only a beautiful form of self-destruction. Sign 5. You feel trapped, but you call it destiny. You tell yourself that you were meant to meet them, that this suffering has purpose, that it is part of your spiritual calling. But destiny that destroys you is not destiny. It is the sacred trap tightening its grip, wrapping you in the illusion of meaning so you will not see the chains. It tells you that leaving would be betrayal, when in truth, leaving is liberation. Yet Jung did not abandon Anna to this fate. He did not tell her simply to walk away. He knew that escape without understanding only repeats the cycle. He showed her that the trap is not the end of the story, it is the beginning. Because the shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Every empath must learn this. The shadow enters your life disguised as a person, but it is not they who are the lesson. It is what they awaken within you. To break the sacred trap, you must name what you see. When the shadow stands before you, ask yourself, what part of me are they carrying? My anger, my hunger for control, my fear of abandonment? Naming it breaks the trance. The next step is to set the boundary that feels impossible. Say no, walk away. Refuse to absorb what is not yours. This act is not punishment, it is purification. It separates your soul from their storm. It is the first act of individuation, the journey toward the self. And then you must turn the mirror inward. Every time you feel compelled to fix someone else, ask instead, where am I still broken? What part of me is still bleeding? For every person you have tried to save was only carrying the cry of your own forgotten child. Do not hate the shadow. Invite it into the light. Create sacred space for your own rage, your own selfishness, your own power. Write it, paint it, scream it if you must. Let it exist, so it no longer has to sneak into your relationships, disguised as someone else. When Anna finally saw that her lover's cruelty was the reflection of her own buried shadow, she wept not for him, but for herself. For the first time, her tears belonged to her. And in those tears, she found freedom. She healed not by saving him, but by reclaiming the fragments of her soul she had hidden in his darkness. That is the transformation, when the empath who once felt cursed becomes the seer. When you no longer attract the deepest shadows because you no longer need them to carry what you have denied, you become whole. And in your wholeness, you see everything. There was another patient Jung once wrote about, a man named David. He was a quiet soul, gentle, attentive, and endlessly giving. When he entered Jung's office, he looked like a man who had been drained by his own goodness. His hands trembled, his eyes flickered with exhaustion, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like something breaking under its own weight. He told Jung about a woman he loved, a woman who seemed fragile, endlessly wounded, and forever on the edge of collapse. David had given her everything: money, time, shelter, attention, devotion. He had become her savior, her caretaker, her confessor. And each time she promised she would change. She would rise just long enough to pull him back into the pit with her. Her pain became his identity, her despair his religion. When Jung asked why he could not leave, David whispered, "If I leave, she will die." But Jung saw the deeper truth. It was not the woman who was dying. It was David's own soul. David was not chained by her wounds. He was chained by the echo of his own. As a boy, he had watched his mother cry in silence, her sadness sealed behind locked doors. He had promised himself that he would never let another woman suffer unseen. Now, Every time his lover wept, he heard his mother's voice. Every cry reopened the wound he had buried in childhood. He was not saving this woman. He was reliving his own unfinished story. That is the sacred trap. The soul believes it is saving another, but in truth it is reenacting the past. The empath mistakes repetition for redemption. The mind calls it love, but the psyche calls it compulsion. And until you awaken, the pattern repeats again and again. Each time the shadow grows darker. Each time the cost grows heavier. Some empaths spend years inside this cycle. Others lose decades. They call it loyalty, but what it truly is spiritual imprisonment, a slow drowning in the waters of their own unconscious. The shadow does not come from outside. It rises from within, taking shape in the bodies of those you meet. That is why the same story keeps finding you under different names. It is not coincidence. It is curriculum. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That is why these relationships feel fated. They are fated, but not by destiny, by design. The psyche designs them as living mirrors, carrying the exact vibration of your unfinished business. And the longer you refuse to see it, the more powerful the mirror becomes. Jung called this process repetition compulsion of the shadow. The empath's tragedy is not that they love too deeply, but that they confuse recognition with purpose. They meet someone whose pain matches the frequency of their own and believe it to be divine alignment. But it is not alignment, it is resonance, and resonance is not love. It is memory disguised as destiny. The soul tries to heal through reenactment. It brings forth the same wound wrapped in new skin, hoping that this time it will end differently. But unless awareness enters, the result is always the same. The empath bleeds, the shadow feeds, and the cycle begins again. This is why Jung warned his students never to romanticize suffering. The empath's compassion is sacred, but when it becomes a mask for avoidance, it turns poisonous. You are not meant to save others from drowning when your lungs are still full of water. To enter the sacred trap without awareness is to mistake descent for devotion. And yet, the story of David did not end in despair. Through months of painful analysis, Jung guided him to see that his lover's tears were not a command, but an echo. He realized that every woman he had tried to rescue was an attempt to rewrite the silence of his childhood. The moment he saw this truth, the pattern lost its hold. He wept for his mother, but for the first time, he did not chain himself to her reflection. That is the beginning of awakening. The moment when the empath no longer asks, "Why are they like this?" but instead asks, "Why do I need them to be?" The shift is small, but it is the hinge of liberation. The mirror turns inward, the rescuer becomes the witness, and the sacred trap begins to dissolve. Because the trap is not external. It was never about the other person. It is the architecture of your own unhealed love, the scaffolding built by your own forgotten grief. When you finally face it, you do not lose your empathy. You refine it. You learn the difference between compassion and compulsion, between love and self-erasure, between destiny and trauma. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The faces may change, the voices may differ, but the pattern will never deceive you again. The rare empath who awakens from the sacred trap becomes something else entirely, not savior, not victim, but seer, one who walks through the dark without confusing it for home. Jung often described human transformation not as a sudden event, but as a sequence of psychic initiations, moments of death and rebirth that reveal the architecture of the soul. For the empath caught in the sacred trap, these initiations appear as 6 distinct stages. Each one deepens the illusion before offering the possibility of awakening. To pass through them is to die to illusion and be reborn into awareness. Stage 1, the lightning strike. You meet someone and it feels like the universe has split open to deliver them into your arms. Electricity floods your veins. Every glance feels like prophecy. Every silence feels like prayer. You tell yourself this is fate. But Jung warned that what feels like fate may only be projection. The soul recognizes in them something it has lost, not their essence, but your own exiled fragment. The lightning strike is not a blessing. It is a summons from the unconscious. The shadow has found its stage. Stage 2, the silent bargain. Without words, you agree to carry their pain. It begins innocently. You listen, you soothe, you forgive. You take on their burdens as though love means becoming their shelter. But beneath the surface, an ancient contract has been signed. Each TMA you excuse their cruelty. Each TMA you hide your discomfort to preserve peace. You whisper yes to the shadow's demand. You are no longer two souls meeting in freedom. You have entered the unspoken covenant of suffering. Stage 3. The erasure. The empath begins to vanish. Piece by piece, you trade authenticity for attachment. You stop expressing dissent. You silence your anger. You forget your laughter. The relationship becomes a monastery of self-denial, where your holiness is measured by how much pain you can absorb without protest. You confuse collapse with commitment, endurance with love. In this stage, the shadow tightens its hold by convincing you that devotion means disappearing. Stage 4. The entanglement. The boundaries blur completely. Their emotions become your atmosphere. Their moods dictate your days. You wake up and realize you do not know where they end, and you begin. Their chaos moves through you like electricity through water. You have become the carrier of their unconscious, the vessel of their storm. This is the most dangerous phase, for you are not only living their life, you are abandoning your own. The sacred trap deepens by binding your worth to their healing. Stage 5. The awakening crisis. Something shatters, perhaps a betrayal, a violent argument, or the silent realization that your spirit is dying inside their orbit. The world tilts. You begin to see what you refuse to see, that your compassion has become a cage. Here, two paths open. Some empaths collapse further, choosing martyrdom, telling themselves that suffering is proof of love. Others tremble but begin to rise. They dare to set a boundary, to say no, to walk away even as their soul shakes with guilt. This moment is the birth of awareness. Stage 6. The reclamation. If you survive the breaking, if you choose to face yourself rather than return to the illusion, you begin to reclaim what was lost. You look inward and see the child who has been waiting for your attention, the child whose tears you tried to erase by healing others. You cry not for them, but for yourself. And for the first time, your tears cleanse rather than bind. The empath who once defined love as sacrifice now learns that love without self is merely surrender. These 6 stages are not myth. They are observed patterns of the psyche, archetypal and precise. They appear in case after case, in life after life. They mark the descent into the underworld and the return to consciousness. To recognize them is to pierce the veil of fate. To name them is to reclaim your power, and if you have lived even one of these stages, you already know their truth. The sacred trap is not mere psychology. It is spiritual warfare. The battle is not between you and another person. It is between your awareness and your shadow. It is between the false self that must save and the true self that must awaken. But Jung never left the empath unarmed. He offered strategies not to destroy the shadow, but to transform the relationship with it. For the shadow cannot be killed. It can only be integrated. To fight it blindly is to strengthen it. To face it consciously is to reclaim its power. So if you find yourself trembling at the edge of awareness, if the lightning has struck and the storm is still raging, know this: you are not being punished. You are being initiated. The sacred trap is not a prison. It is a passage. The soul has chosen this descent to teach you the difference between love and bondage, compassion and control, empathy and erasure. And though the descent may terrify you, it is only through the underworld that the self is born. Jung often warned that awareness without action is cruelty. To awaken and yet remain bound is a torment deeper than blindness. For the empath to free themselves, insight must be transformed into movement, a living ritual of reclamation. The sacred trap is dismantled not by rage or escape, but by 5 inner weapons. Each weapon is a mirror forged in truth, and each one cuts through illusion. The first weapon, radical honesty. The shadow thrives in secrecy. It feeds on what you will not name. The first act of liberation is to say aloud what you have denied. Speak the words that tremble in your throat. I am drawn to their darkness because it mirrors my own. This is not self-blame. It is revelation. Once named, the shadow loses half its power. What was buried in shame becomes material for healing. Honesty is the knife that cuts the sacred thread of denial. Without it, no transformation begins. The second weapon, the boundary. A boundary is not cruelty. It is the gate that guards your soul. To set one is to declare, your storm is not my home. Empaths often mistake compassion for surrender, believing that love must absorb all pain. But a love that consumes you is not love, it is hunger disguised as virtue. The first time you say no to what drains you, the world may quake. You may feel guilt, loneliness, and fear. Yet that tremor is the sound of chains breaking. The boundary is sacred because it defines where you end and the other begins. It is the architecture of freedom. The third weapon, shadow work. The empath must become the alchemist of their own darkness. You cannot heal what you refuse to touch. Jung said, "What you resist persists, but what you face becomes integrated." Do not polish your pain with spiritual platitudes. Sit with it, write it, paint it, speak it, dance it. Allow the ugly, the selfish, the furious to exist without censorship. The goal is not to destroy the shadow, but to dialogue with it. Ask it, "What do you want from me?" Often, it will answer softly, "To be seen." Integration begins when you give the disowned parts of yourself a name and a voice. The fourth weapon, sacred selfishness. Empaths tremble at this word, as though to claim themselves is sin. But Jung understood that without the ability to center your own soul, empathy becomes self-harm. Sacred selfishness is not arrogance, it is balance. It is the recognition that your life is holy, that your well-being is not negotiable, and that the light you offer the world must not come from a dying flame. To say, "I choose my life over your destruction," is not cruelty. It is individuation, the birth of selfhood beyond servitude. The fifth weapon, meaning. Jung taught that even suffering must bow before meaning. The sacred trap is not sent to curse you, but to awaken you. The moment you assign meaning to your pain, it transforms from poison to medicine. You begin to see that every broken bond was an initiation, every heartbreak a lesson in self-recognition. Meaning turns trauma into wisdom, and wisdom becomes protection. When you see the trap not as punishment but as passage, the cycle ends. Together, these 5 weapons form the rite of liberation. Radical honesty exposes the shadow. Boundaries contain it. Shadow work transforms it. Sacred selfishness restores energy. Meaning turns scars into symbols. When practiced together, they create what Jung called the individuation spiral, the upward movement of the soul, reclaiming its lost parts. Anna learned to wield them one by one. She began by naming the truth. She had mistaken suffering for purpose. Then she drew a boundary. She stopped explaining away cruelty. When the guilt came, she held it like a newborn, whispering that it was not proof of sin, but of rebirth. She began journaling the rage she had always feared, painting the faces of her lost selves. For the first TMA, she used color for herself. David, too, transformed. He no longer defined love as rescue. He stopped searching for women to save and started listening to the voice of the boy within him. He realized that empathy was never the curse. The curse was the silence he had inherited from his mother's tears. He wept again, but this time, his tears cleansed instead of chained. And as Jung watched both of them rise, he noted something profound. Those who break the sacred trap do not become cold. They become clear. They no longer confuse pity with love or chaos with passion. Their empathy becomes vision, sharp, luminous, discerning. They can walk into rooms and feel the hidden suffering of others without mistaking it for their responsibility. They sense manipulation before it takes root. They no longer serve as mirrors for others' wounds. They serve as mirrors for truth. This is what it means to be reborn from the sacred trap, to live as an empath who no longer bleeds to prove their love, to hold compassion with steel, to see everything without absorbing everything. The trap was never your enemy. It was your teacher. It forced you to face the darkness you once feared, to claim the power you once disowned. It stripped away illusion until only truth remained, and in that truth, you discovered something ancient and invincible, the self that cannot be broken. There comes a moment when the storm no longer terrifies you, because you have walked through it and discovered that it was made of your own breath. The sacred trap, once the architecture of your pain, becomes the temple of your transformation. Jung called this the alchemical stage, the phase where the soul, having confronted the darkness, begins to transmute it into light. What was once poison becomes medicine. What was once bondage becomes wisdom. The empath who has broken the trap is no longer naive. They know the cost of compassion. They understand that empathy without boundaries is a form of self-betrayal. They no longer mistake intensity for intimacy, nor chaos for connection. They carry their heart not as an open wound, but as a sacred instrument tuned to truth. They do not save others to feel worthy. They love because they are already whole. The transformation begins subtly. You walk into rooms and no longer search for the most broken soul to fix. You do not feel compelled to sit beside pain just because it echoes your own. You can sense suffering without drowning in it. You listen, you see. You care, but you remain anchored in yourself. Your empathy becomes clarity. Your sensitivity becomes sight. You feel everything, yet you choose wisely what to hold. You start to notice beauty where once there was only chaos. The same intensity that used to burn you now fuels your creativity, your purpose, your depth. The shadow has not vanished. It has been integrated. It no longer hides in the faces of others. It lives inside you, known, named, and at peace. The very traits that once drew you to destruction, your openness, your intuition, your longing for connection, now serve as your greatest strengths. You become a mirror, but a conscious one. You reflect truth instead of trauma. The empath transformed into seer does not walk above others. They walk among them, but with eyes that see through masks. They sense manipulation before it blossoms. They recognize emotional hunger as it approaches, not with fear, but with discernment. Their compassion has teeth, gentle but unyielding. They can say no without guilt. They can leave without hatred. They can love without losing themselves. This is the sacred armor Jung spoke of: empathy tempered by awareness, love reinforced by boundaries, heart protected by wisdom. It is not hardness, it is wholeness. You no longer need to prove your goodness through pain. You no longer equate love with sacrifice. You realize that true love is not crucifixion, but communion. Two whole beings meeting without the need to devour or be devoured. Now, when the shadow returns, and it will, you do not panic. You greet it like an old teacher. You ask, "What lesson do you bring this time?" And it bows to you, for you have become its master. The same patterns that once enslaved you now serve as guides, leading you deeper into authenticity. The shadow becomes the compass of your evolution. You learn that every scar is a map, not a sign of defeat, but of initiation. Each mark on your soul tells the story of a battle survived, a lesson integrated. You no longer hide your scars. You wear them like sacred symbols, glowing faintly beneath your skin. They remind you that you have faced the underworld and returned, that you have died to illusion and been reborn into truth. This is the metamorphosis. The empath who once absorbed everything becomes the seer who perceives all. The wounded becomes the wise. The victim becomes the vessel. The trap becomes the temple. You carry the same light, but now it no longer flickers in fear. It burns steadily, calmly, as if it has always known that the darkness was never the enemy, only the teacher. And when you look back at those who once hurt you, you no longer see villains. You see mirrors. You see lessons in human form, souls who carried fragments of your forgotten self so you could reclaim them. You bless them and release them. For forgiveness is not forgetting. It is freeing your energy from their shadow. Now, when someone says, "You are too sensitive," you smile. You know that sensitivity is not weakness. It is sight. It is your soul's antenna, tuned to frequencies others cannot perceive. You are no longer ashamed of it. You honor it, protect it, and direct it with precision. You have become what Jung called individuated, a being both human and divine, rooted and transcendent, compassionate and clear. To live this way is not to escape the world, but to see it with new eyes. Every relationship becomes an opportunity to remain awake. Every challenge becomes a test of integrity. Every pain becomes a reminder that you are alive, still transforming, still walking the spiral between shadow and light. You will never again confuse love with suffering. You will never again hand your soul to someone else's chaos. You will see through manipulation as though it were glass. You will stand whole, soft in heart, but unshakable in spirit. This is the promise of individuation. To feel everything, but to be consumed by nothing. To love deeply, but never at the cost of yourself. To carry light into the darkest places without losing sight of home. So when the next storm comes, remember this: you have walked through fire before. You have seen your own abyss and survived. The trap was sacred because it revealed who you truly are, not a savior, not a victim, but a soul learning to see everything. And as Jung said, the shadow is not evil. It is merely the light we have not yet understood. You understand it now. You have made it conscious, and because of that, it can no longer rule you. The empath has become the seer. The heart that once bled for others now beats for truth. The sacred trap has become the sacred path. When the empath finally steps out of the sacred trap, the world looks the same, but nothing feels the same. The colors seem sharper. The silence is heavier. The face is clearer. You walk among people who still carry their wounds like chains, who still mistake chaos for chemistry and self-abandonment for devotion. You want to help them, but you no longer rush in to save, because now you know that saving others before they are ready is another form of control. Jung wrote that no one can be led into the light by force. The awakened empath becomes a quiet light, not a rescuer but a reminder. You move through life with a calm power. Your empathy has matured from reaction to awareness. When someone speaks from their wound, you no longer absorb it. You listen with compassion and discernment. You see the patterns behind their words, the shadows behind their masks. You know when a plea for help is genuine and when it is manipulation disguised as need. Your intuition is no longer an ache. It is an instrument. You hear the symphony of the human heart and choose which notes to play. There will still be moments when the world tests you. People will call you cold because you no longer overextend. They will call you distant because you no longer bleed on command. But you will smile, for you have learned that detachment is not apathy. It is clarity. It is love that does not lose itself. You give what you can, but you no longer give what will cost your peace. You can walk away from storms without guilt, because you understand that compassion without boundaries is self-erasure. Living as a whole being in a world still asleep means walking a path few can see. You will be misunderstood. Some will call you selfish. Others will envy your serenity. But those who are ready, those whose hearts tremble at the edge of awakening, will find you. They will recognize the light in your eyes as the same fire that once burned in their own darkness. You will not need to speak much. Your presence will be enough. In Time, you will realize that the purpose of your suffering was not to make you harder, but to make you luminous. The sacred trap was never punishment. It was apprenticeship. It taught you to distinguish illusion from truth, dependency from love, pity from compassion. It broke you only so that you could become transparent, so that light could move through you without distortion. You are not the person you were before the storm. You are the storm that learned to see itself. There will be days when you feel the old pull, the gravitational tug of the wounded, the temptation to lose yourself in another's chaos. The difference now is awareness. You will pause. You will breathe. You will ask, is this love or is this projection? And the moment you ask, the spell will break. For consciousness is the antidote to compulsion. The trap can no longer hold you because you no longer walk in the dark unaware. Jung called this return the completion of the circle. You have gone down into the underworld, met your shadow, and brought back fire. You have become what mythology calls the wounded healer, one who has walked through their own suffering and emerged with medicine for others. But this, Time, you do not give the medicine away recklessly. You offer it with discernment, with respect for your own energy. The healer no longer bleeds to prove their worth. They teach through embodiment. You will discover a new kind of love not born from need or destiny, but from choice. A love between two whole beings who meet without demanding to be completed. There is no savior, no victim, no rescuer. There is only recognition. You look into their eyes and see not your wounds, but your reflection, whole, calm, awake. And in that stillness, love becomes freedom. You will also learn to honor solitude. Silence will no longer frighten you because it no longer hides your pain. It holds your peace. You will light a candle at night, not for someone else's healing, but for your own serenity. You will listen to the sound of your breath and realize that it is the same breath that once spoke your name through the mouths of others. The shadow that once haunted you now lives inside you as guidance, as intuition, as wisdom. The return to the world is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of conscious living. You will work, love, create, and rest, but every act will carry awareness. You will know when to open and when to close, when to give and when to guard. You will see people not for who they pretend to be, but for who they truly are beneath the performance. You will bless them without losing yourself among them. And one day, perhaps, you will sit across from someone who reminds you of who you once were, trembling, exhausted, convinced that love means suffering. You will not rush to fix them. You will look into their eyes and say softly, the shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. You will tell them that what they are enduring is not the end, but the beginning. You will hand them the torch that once saved you and whisper, you will see everything. That is how the sacred trap becomes the sacred lineage, each awakened soul lighting the path for another. The chain of pain becomes a chain of light, and the world, slowly, begins to wake. Jung said that the goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness. Wholeness does not mean purity. It means inclusion, the courage to hold both light and darkness, love and anger, creation and destruction, without losing your center. You are not here to be unbroken. You are here to be complete. So walk gently, you who have seen the underworld. Guard your flame, but do not hide it. The world needs your vision not to save it, but to illuminate it. And when the next shadow approaches, stand whole, look it in the eye, and remember, the trap was sacred, the descent was holy, and you have already returned, because the empath has become the seer, the wound has become the wisdom, the darkness has become your light. And you see everything. The screen fades to black. For a moment there is only the sound of a quiet breath, steady and deliberate, like the earth itself inhaling. Then, a soft voice, the voice of your own awareness, begins to speak. You have walked through the darkness, not as a victim, but as a witness. You have seen the mirror of your own soul reflected in the eyes of another, and learned that love without self is not love at all. You have met your shadow, and found that it was never your enemy. It was your forgotten self, waiting to be seen. In this silence after the storm, everything becomes clear. The faces, the heartbreaks, the endless cycles, they were never curses. They were invitations. Each one carried a message written in pain. Know yourself, claim yourself, become whole. The sacred trap was the psyche's way of calling you home. Look at yourself now. You are not who you were when this began. You no longer chase what wounds you. You no longer confuse compassion with sacrifice. You have learned that empathy without awareness destroys, but empathy with boundaries transforms. You no longer need to be needed. You simply need to be. You have discovered what Jung called the divine paradox, that healing begins not by running from the darkness, but by integrating it. The light you sought outside was always inside you, buried beneath the fear of your own power. Now, that power rises quietly, like dawn. It does not roar, it does not demand, it simply shines. You will still feel the pull of the old stories. The sacred trap will whisper from time to time, dressed in new faces, new desires, new wounds. But you will recognize it now. You will feel the vibration of illusion beneath the melody of love. And with a gentle smile, you will say, I see you. That awareness alone will dissolve its power. To live awake is not to live without pain. It is to live without illusion. It is to walk through both beauty and shadow without forgetting who you are. It is to hold your own heart with both tenderness and strength, to feel deeply, but to remain grounded in truth. The rare empath, the one who once attracted the deepest shadows, is not cursed. They are chosen. Chosen to descend into darkness so they may learn the anatomy of light. Chosen to feel deeply so that compassion can be reborn as clarity. Chosen to fall so that others may see how to rise. And when they finally stand whole, when they have integrated the chaos, they no longer attract destruction. They attract mirrors of peace. They meet people who do not drain them, but reflect their wholeness back to them. Love, finally, becomes what it was always meant to be, not rescue, not sacrifice, but recognition. The soul's true purpose was never to save others. It was to see itself, to become conscious of its own vastness. That is the secret Jung left behind. The unconscious will stage itself as fate until you make it conscious. You have done that. You have turned destiny into awareness, pain into wisdom, shadow into gold. So now, as the candle flickers on the final frame, breathe deeply. Feel the quiet strength in your chest. Know that every tear you shed, every heartbreak you endured, was sacred currency, the price of your awakening. You are not broken. You are initiated. You are the proof that even in the darkest chambers of the human psyche, light can be born again. And if someone asks you how you survived, you will tell them the truth. I stopped trying to save the darkness in others. I learned to meet it in myself. Now, you carry the fire. Walk with it. Guard it. Share it when the world grows dim. Because the journey never truly ends, the shadow will return in new forms, testing your clarity, tempting your empathy, asking, have you really learned? And each time, you will answer not with words, but with presence. You will not collapse. You will not chase. You will not confuse. You will simply see. And seeing, you will smile not with pride, but with peace, because you know what few ever do, that the sacred trap was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to awaken you. You are the rare empath who has walked through the underworld and come back whole. You have turned the trap into a path, the wound into wisdom, the shadow into sight. And now, as you stand between worlds light and dark, self and soul, The only words left to speak are the ones that end every sacred initiation. I see everything.